The air is thick with salt and gunpowder. A Spanish galleon, a treasure-laden beast, is torn apart not by a storm, but by a tempest of English fury. Men scream in languages their killers do not understand. This is not warfare as kings would wage it, it is a violent, intimate, and brutally personal form of theft. And at the heart of this bloody whirlwind stands one man. A name that inspires terror in the hearts of his enemies, and a fierce, unwavering loyalty in his crew. To the Spanish Empire, he was El Drac, the Dragon. A heretic, a pirate, a demon spat from the very depths of hell itself. But to the fledgling English nation, he was something else entirely. A patriot, a hero, the chosen instrument of his queen's ambition and his God's will. So which was he? A vicious pirate draped in a flag of convenience? Or a noble patriot, fighting a shadow war for his country? The truth, like all history, lies buried in a sea of blood and gold. Our story begins not on the high seas, but in the green, rolling hills of Devonshire. A land of quiet piety and simmering ambition, on the fringe of a rapidly changing world. Francis Drake was born a Protestant in an England racked by religious turmoil. His father, a tenant farmer, was forced to flee his home, instilling in his son a profound hatred for Catholic persecution. The sea was his only escape, and his only education. He learned the language of the tides, the whispers of the wind, and the brutal calculus of trade and survival on the water. His early voyages took him into a dark and morally ambiguous world. A world built on the commodification of human life, the transatlantic slave trade. With his cousin, John Hawkins, Drake sailed to West Africa, capturing men and women to sell to the Spanish colonies in the New World. It was a brutal business, but a profitable one. This was the paradox of the age. Men of God engaging in a trade of souls, all under the watchful eye of a crown that publicly condemned the practice while privately profiting from it. But a single, cataclysmic event would shatter this fragile arrangement. An act of betrayal that would forge Drake's hatred of Spain into an unbreakable, vengeful sword. At San Juan de Ulua, the Spanish viceroy, promising safe harbor for repairs, launched a devastating surprise attack. The English fleet was annihilated. Drake and Hawkins barely escaped with their lives, leaving behind their ships, their treasure, and hundreds of their men. The humiliation was absolute, the fury was incandescent. In the cold, dark waters of the Atlantic, a vow was made. Drake would have his revenge. He would make the Spanish Empire bleed. This was no longer about trade. This was a personal crusade, a holy war cloaked in the guise of piracy. The dragon had been awakened. He returned to England not as a failed merchant, but as a man with a singular, obsessive purpose. He began to petition the court, seeking a license for vengeance. Queen Elizabeth, ever the pragmatist, saw an opportunity. Unable to wage open war against the mighty Philip II of Spain, she could unleash this provincial sea dog as her unofficial weapon. This was the age of the privateer. A legal gray area where a pirate's actions could be sanctioned by the state, transforming theft into an act of patriotic duty. Drake's target was the throat of the Spanish Empire, the Isthmus of Panama. This narrow strip of land was the conduit through which the silver of Peru flowed back to Spain. His first major raid on Nombre de Dios was a lesson in audacity. He led his men through the sleeping town, a small band against an entire colonial outpost. They reached the treasure house, a building overflowing with silver bars. But in the ensuing fight, Drake was severely wounded, his blood pooling on the very treasure he sought. His men, fearing for his life, abandoned the silver to carry their captain back to the ships. The raid was a failure, yet it proved that the Spanish treasure fleets were vulnerable. Undeterred, Drake forged an unprecedented alliance. He partnered with the Cimarrons, escaped African slaves who knew the jungle and shared his burning hatred for the Spanish. Guided by his new allies, Drake was led to a tall tree. From its heights, he saw something no Englishman had ever witnessed before, the vast, shimmering expanse of the Pacific Ocean. In that moment, a new, audacious plan was born. He prayed to God for life and leave to sail once in an English ship upon that sea. But first, there was the matter of the treasure. He and his allies laid a perfect ambush for the Spanish silver train, the Tren de Mulas. The attack was swift and merciless. They overwhelmed the Spanish guards and captured a fortune in gold and silver, so much that they had to bury half of it. Drake returned to England a rich man. His investors, including the Queen herself, received a staggering return. The pirate was proving to be a most profitable patriot. His success, however, infuriated the Spanish ambassador and placed Elizabeth in a delicate political position. Drake was forced to lie low, a celebrated hero who could not be publicly acknowledged. But neither Drake nor his queen could ignore the vision from that jungle treetop. A new, far more ambitious plan was taking shape, a voyage into the forbidden waters of the Pacific. This was to be no mere raid. It was a mission of exploration, plunder, and geopolitical defiance, aimed at the soft, unprotected underbelly of the Spanish Empire. The expedition was shrouded in secrecy. The crew was told they were sailing for Alexandria. Only a handful of insiders knew their true, terrifying destination. As they sailed south, tensions began to fester. The fleet was a microcosm of Elizabethan society, divided by class and ambition. A gentleman courtier, Thomas Doughty, began to challenge Drake's authority. Doughty, a friend of the expedition's powerful backers, believed himself to be Drake's co-commander. He sowed dissent, practiced witchcraft, and threatened to unravel the entire voyage. Drake, a man of humble birth, could not afford to lose control. At a desolate bay in modern-day Argentina, he made a ruthless decision. He put Thomas Doughty on trial for mutiny and witchcraft. The verdict was a foregone conclusion. Doughty was found guilty. In a bizarre, theatrical display of civility, the two men took communion together before Doughty was calmly beheaded. This brutal act sent a clear message. There was only one authority on this voyage. The law of England, and the ambition of courtiers, ended at the water's edge. With discipline restored, Drake sailed towards the most feared waterway on the planet, the Strait of Magellan. A treacherous, labyrinthine passage between the Atlantic and the unknown Pacific. He renamed his flagship the Golden Hind in honor of a patron. It was a new name for a new chapter, a vessel about to sail off the edge of the known world. After a harrowing 16-day passage, the Golden Hind emerged into the Pacific. But their trial was not over. A furious storm scattered the fleet and blew them far to the south. This tempest, however, led to an accidental, monumental discovery. Drake realized that Tierra del Fuego was not part of a southern continent, but a series of islands. Below it lay open sea. He had discovered what would become known as the Drake Passage. The violent meeting point of the Atlantic and Pacific, and the key to a new understanding of global geography. Now, alone and with his mission in jeopardy, Drake turned north. He sailed into the Spanish Pacific, a region that had been a private lake for the empire for nearly a century. The Spanish settlements were completely unprepared. They had no fortifications facing the sea, believing no foreign ship could possibly reach them. Drake fell upon them like a wolf into a fold. He raided town after town, plundering churches for their gold and silver ornaments, and ships for their precious cargo. The dragon had been unleashed upon paradise. His methods were often surprisingly restrained. He avoided needless bloodshed, seeking to capture treasure and intelligence, not to wage a war of annihilation. From captured navigators, Drake learned of a legendary treasure galleon sailing from Lima to Panama. Her name was Nuestra Señora de la Concepción, mockingly nicknamed Cacafuego. The pursuit was relentless. Drake pushed the Golden Hind to its limits, its sails strained to catch every breath of wind, chasing a ghost on the horizon. He caught her off the coast of Ecuador. The Spanish galleon, slow and heavy with treasure, was no match for the swift, well-armed Golden Hind. The treasure aboard was beyond imagination. It took 6 days to transfer the silver, gold, and jewels. It was a haul that would alter the balance of power in Europe. Now impossibly rich, Drake faced a new problem. To return south through the Strait of Magellan would be suicide, the entire Spanish navy would be waiting. He sailed north, searching for the fabled Northwest Passage, a hypothetical route back to the Atlantic over the top of North America. It was a journey into myth. The weather grew impossibly cold. The ship was battered by freezing gales. Drake realized the passage was a fantasy, at least for him. He turned south to find a place to repair his ship. He landed somewhere in modern-day California. There, he encountered the native Coast Miwok people, who greeted him with a mixture of curiosity and ceremony. Believing they had offered him their land, Drake claimed the territory for his queen. He named it Nova Albion, New England, and left behind a brass plate to mark his claim. With the Golden Hind repaired and provisioned, Drake faced his final, terrifying gamble. He would sail west, across the Pacific, to circumnavigate the globe. For 68 days, they saw no land. The ship, weighted down with treasure, wallowed in the immense emptiness of the world's largest ocean. It was a supreme test of navigation and nerve. They made landfall in the Spice Islands, modern-day Indonesia. Here, Drake traded some of his stolen silver for valuable cloves, adding yet another layer of profit to his voyage. The journey home was fraught with peril. The Golden Hind struck a reef and was nearly lost. The crew jettisoned cannons and spices to free her, a desperate act to save themselves and their treasure. After rounding the Cape of Good Hope and sailing up the coast of Africa, they finally caught the familiar winds of home. After nearly 3 years, the shores of England appeared on the horizon. Drake anchored in Plymouth Harbor on September 26, 1580. He was the first Englishman, and the first commander of his own expedition, to circumnavigate the earth. His return created a sensation and a diplomatic crisis. The Spanish ambassador demanded the pirate's head and the return of the stolen treasure. For months, Queen Elizabeth hesitated. She kept Drake at a distance, weighing the political risks against the immense reward now sitting in her treasury. The value of the treasure was staggering. It was more than the crown's entire annual revenue. Enough to pay off the national debt and invest in a new future. Finally, the Queen made her decision. In a stunning act of defiance against Spain, she boarded the Golden Hind at Deptford. There, on the deck of the ship that had terrorized the Spanish Empire, she did not arrest the pirate. She knighted him. He was now Sir Francis Drake. The Devonshire farm boy was one of the most famous and wealthy men in England. A living legend, his story told in ballads and books. But his knighthood was an open insult to King Philip II of Spain. It was a gauntlet thrown down, an act of state-sponsored piracy that made open war between the two nations inevitable. The stolen treasure did more than enrich the crown. It funded a new English confidence, fueling investment in new ships, new trade routes, and a new vision of a global empire. Drake became a symbol of this New England, audacious, Protestant, and unapologetically ambitious. He was the embodiment of a nation ready to challenge the old Catholic order. But was this transformation real? Can a man's nature be changed by a title? Or was Sir Francis just a pirate with better clothes and a royal permission slip? The question would be answered in the crucible of open war. Philip II, enraged and emboldened, began to assemble the largest fleet the world had ever seen. The Spanish Armada. Its mission was simple: to crush the English heretics, depose their illegitimate queen, and restore the Catholic faith by force. England trembled. Their small navy was vastly outnumbered. Their only hope lay in the skill and daring of their commanders, men forged in the brutal school of privateering. And who better to lead the defense than the man who knew the Spanish better than anyone? Sir Francis Drake was appointed Vice Admiral of the English fleet. Even before the Armada sailed, Drake launched a preemptive strike of breathtaking audacity. He sailed directly into the Spanish port of Cadiz, their main naval base. For 2 days, he wreaked havoc, sinking and burning over 30 ships and destroying vital supplies. He called it singeing the King of Spain's beard. This daring raid delayed the Armada by a full year, buying England precious time to prepare its defenses. It was a classic Drake maneuver, swift, decisive, and psychologically devastating. When the Armada finally arrived in the English Channel in 1588, it was a terrifying sight. A crescent of 130 ships, a floating city of soldiers and sailors. The English ships, smaller and more maneuverable, refused to engage in a traditional close-quarters battle. Instead, they harassed the Spanish fleet with long-range cannon fire. Drake was in his element, a seahawk harrying a lumbering bear. His tactics were frustrating, unconventional, and infuriatingly effective. The decisive moment came when the Spanish anchored off Calais. Under the cover of darkness, Drake unleashed his most terrifying weapon, fireships. Panic ripped through the Spanish fleet. To avoid the flames, captains cut their anchor cables, breaking their tight formation and scattering into the North Sea. The next day, at the Battle of Gravelines, the English fell upon the disorganized Spanish ships. It was a decisive victory, crippling the heart of the Armada. But the weather delivered the final blow. A massive storm, the Protestant wind, drove the fleeing remnants of the Armada north around Scotland and Ireland. Of the 130 ships that sailed, fewer than half limped back to Spain. The invasion was a catastrophic failure. England was saved. In this, England's finest hour, there was no ambiguity. Sir Francis Drake was a patriot. His lifetime of experience fighting the Spanish had been the nation's sharpest sword. He had risen from pirate to admiral, from scourge to savior. His legacy seemed secure, his place in the pantheon of English heroes guaranteed. But history is rarely so neat. The summit of a man's life is often followed by a steep and unforgiving decline. The hero of the Armada would soon face his own mortality. In the years after the Armada, Drake's star began to fade. A failed expedition to Portugal tarnished his reputation for invincibility. The court, ever fickle, began to turn to new heroes. Drake, the man of action, was ill-suited to the politics and intrigue of peacetime. He attempted one last, grand expedition to the West Indies, a return to the hunting grounds of his youth. He sought to capture Panama City and deal a final, crippling blow to Spain. But the Spanish were no longer unprepared. They had learned from El Drac's lessons. His attacks were repulsed, his strategies foiled. The magic was gone. The voyage was a disaster, plagued by disease and defeat. Drake, the invincible sea captain, was forced into a humiliating retreat. Off the coast of Panama, the very place that had forged his legend, Sir Francis Drake fell ill with dysentery. The dragon was finally slain, not by a Spanish sword, but by a common fever. He died on January 28, 1596. As was his wish, he was dressed in his full armor, sealed in a lead coffin, and committed to the sea. The man who had plundered the world's oceans found his final resting place within them. His grave remains undiscovered to this day, a lost treasure at the bottom of the sea. So we are left with our question. Sir Francis Drake, pirate or patriot? Was he a thief who stole a world for his queen, or a soldier who fought a new kind of war? To the Spanish, whose treasure he stole and whose people he terrorized, the answer is simple. He was a heretic and a pirate, a monster whose name is still used to frighten children. To the English, who he enriched and defended, the answer is equally clear. He was a hero, a master mariner, the architect of their naval destiny and a founder of their empire. Perhaps the truth is that he was a product of his violent, dogmatic, and transformative age. An era where the lines between piracy and patriotism were not just blurred, but actively erased by the ambitions of kings and queens. He was a necessary monster for a rising nation. His piracy funded England's ascent, and his patriotism defended it. The two were inseparable, two sides of the same bloody coin. His story is a dark mirror held up to the very idea of empire. It reminds us that nations are not born from treaties and ideals alone, but are often forged in the crucible of theft, violence, and the audacious will of complicated, morally ambiguous men.